I was 54 years old, standing in the produce section of a Trader Joe's on a Wednesday afternoon, when I saw her. It took me 3 full seconds to place the face, brown eyes, same slight build, but the wariness I remembered from a child had calcified into something harder. She was holding a basket with single-serving meals, the kind you buy when cooking for one feels pointless, and when our eyes met, I watched her do the same calculation I'd just done. Recognition, uncertainty, then a careful smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Patterson?" Her voice was quieter than I remembered, and I'd spent 6 years listening to that voice. "Emma." I said her name like I'd thought it 1,000 times, because I had. "Emma Hartley." She shifted her basket to her other hand. "Emma Chin now. I got married." She glanced down at her ring finger, naked. "Well. Was married." I'd taught elementary school for 31 years before I retired, and you'd think after that many students, they'd blur together. They don't. Some faces burn themselves into your memory, and not always for the reasons you'd expect. Emma wasn't my brightest student, wasn't my most troubled in the obvious ways. She was my most invisible, and that's what I couldn't forget. I had her first in first grade, back when Lincoln Elementary still did looping, keeping the same teacher for multiple years. Then I had her again in 4th through 6th when I moved to upper elementary. 6 years total. 6 years of watching patterns I couldn't name become patterns I couldn't ignore become patterns I couldn't do anything about. "You look well," I said, which was a lie. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "You too." She hesitated, then added, "I think about your class sometimes. You were really kind to me." The word kind landed wrong, like she was thanking me for basic human decency, and I felt something crack open in my chest that I'd kept carefully sealed for 18 years. "Do you have time for coffee?" The words came out before I'd thought them through. "There's a place next door." I watched her calculate again, the risk of saying yes, the cost of saying no. Finally, she nodded. 20 minutes later, we were sitting across from each other in a corner booth, and I was holding a mug of Earl Grey I hadn't touched. Emma had ordered black coffee and wrapped both hands around it like she was cold, even though it was 70 degrees outside. "I didn't think you'd remember me," she said. "I remember all my long-term students." I paused. "I remember you particularly well." "Why?" I should have deflected. Should have said something gentle and meaningless. Instead, I said, "Because I spent 6 years worrying about you, and I never figured out how to stop." Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between us. She took a sip of coffee, set it down carefully. "Did you know?" she asked quietly. "Back then. Did you know what was happening?" "I don't know what happened," I said carefully. "I know what I saw." "What did you see?" I'd been asked that question before, by the school counselor in year 3, by the principal in year 5. I'd given careful, documented answers then. But Emma wasn't asking for documentation. "I saw a first grader whose mother forgot to pick her up from school 7 times in one semester," I said. "I saw a 4th grader who wore the same pants for 3 weeks straight with a broken zipper, even though her younger brother showed up every day in new clothes. I saw a 6th grader who never got a lunch packed, never got help with projects, never got picked for family presentation days because nobody in her family would show up." Emma's hands tightened around her mug. "I saw a kid who made herself smaller every year," I continued. "Who stopped raising her hand. Who sat in the back. Who looked at the door every time it opened like she was expecting someone who never came. You saw all that." Her voice was flat. "I documented all that. I reported my concerns to the counselor 3 separate times. I called your mother twice to discuss Emma's needs. I kept extra granola bars in my desk drawer because I knew you wouldn't eat otherwise." I stopped, feeling the familiar burn of professional inadequacy. "I saw everything except a reason I could legally intervene." "There was no abuse," Emma said quietly. "Not the kind anyone could report." They fed me, clothed me, kept a roof over my head. They just forgot I existed most of the time. Or remembered just enough to make sure I knew I was the wrong kid. I'd suspected that exact thing for 6 years, but hearing it confirmed felt like being punched. Your brother, I started. Evan. He's 30 now. Doctor. Married. 2 kids. My parents' pride and joy. She said it without inflection, like reciting facts from a textbook. They wanted a boy. Got me instead. Spent the first 4 years of my life disappointed, then they had Evan, and suddenly they had the child they'd actually wanted. I wasn't neglected enough for anyone to notice. I was just surplus. I thought about Evan Hartley, who I'd had for 1 year in 2nd grade. Bright kid, confident, always had someone at pickup. His mother volunteered in his classroom. His father came to school events. I'd watched them dote on him the same years I'd watched Emma fade into corners. I couldn't prove anything, I said, and heard the guilt I'd carried for 18 years leak into my voice. You weren't being hit. You weren't starving. You were just overlooked. And there's no protocol for that. No checklist. I couldn't call CPS and say this child's family forgets she exists. It's not actionable. I know. Emma's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. You did more than anyone else. Those granola bars, I knew why you kept them. The time you accidentally bought an extra winter coat and said you couldn't return it. The way you always partnered me with Rebecca Torres for projects because you knew her family would include me in their house. I knew Mrs. Patterson. Rebecca Torres. I hadn't thought about her in years, bright, empathetic kid with a loud, warm family. I'd deliberately paired her with Emma for 3 straight years. Did it help? I asked. Emma considered this. Yes and no. It helped me survive elementary school. It didn't help me believe I deserved more than survival. The coffee shop sounds, espresso machine hissing, conversations murmuring, seemed very far away. What happened after 6th grade? I asked. After you left my class? Middle school. High school. College on a scholarship because my parents wouldn't help pay, even though they paid for all 4 years of Evan's private undergraduate and medical school. She recited it like a resume. I got a degree in library science. Got married at 24 to a man who seemed to actually see me. Got divorced at 28 when I realized he'd married me because I was easy to overlook. He liked having a wife who didn't demand attention. Emma. I cut my parents off when I was 26, she continued. Thanksgiving dinner. Evan announced his wife was pregnant, and my mother actually cried with joy. I'd told them I was engaged 3 weeks earlier and got a "that's nice, honey" before they changed the subject. I watched my mother cry over Evan's future child, and something just broke. I got up, walked out, never went back. Good, I said fiercely, and surprised both of us. Emma blinked. Good. Good. They didn't deserve you then. They don't deserve you now. She stared at me, and for a second, I saw the 6-year-old who'd look at me like I was the only person who remembered her name. I thought you'd say I should forgive them, she said quietly. That family is complicated, that I should try to reconcile. I'm a teacher, not a saint. I watched those people treat you like an afterthought for 6 years. I watched you make yourself smaller and quieter because you learned that taking up space got you nothing. Forgiveness is your choice, but you don't owe them a damn thing. Emma's eyes filled, and she looked away quickly, blinking hard. I wondered sometimes, she said after a moment, if I was making it up. If I was being dramatic. If maybe I was just sensitive and every family has a favorite and I should stop being so needy. You weren't making it up. I said it with all the authority of 6 years of careful observation. I saw it. It was real. What they did to you was real. She nodded slowly, still not looking at me. The divorce, I said carefully. You said you realized he married you because you were easy to overlook. I made the same mistake my parents did, Emma said. I confused quiet with easy. Undemanding with comfortable. He didn't want a partner. He wanted someone who wouldn't interfere with his life. And I was so good at being invisible by then that I didn't even notice what was happening until his coworker mentioned how nice it must be that I let him have so much freedom. Like I was doing him a favor by not existing too loudly. The familiar weight of teacher guilt pressed down on me, the eternal question of whether I could have done more, should have seen something differently, might have changed an outcome if I'd just been better at my job. I failed you, I said. No. Emma's voice was firm. You were the only adult who saw me. That matters, even if you couldn't fix it. Seeing isn't enough. Sometimes it is. She finally looked at me again. Do you know what I remember most from your class? I shook my head. 2nd grade. It was my birthday, December 14th. My parents forgot. Evan's birthday was in June, and they always threw him these huge parties, but mine was close to Christmas, and they just didn't bother. I came to school, and you had a cupcake on my desk. Just one, with a candle. You sang happy birthday. You'd remembered. I did remember. I remembered every forgotten birthday, every ignored achievement, every moment I'd tried to fill gaps I had no business being able to fill. That was 7 years of birthdays, I said. 7 cupcakes don't make up for what you didn't get at home. No, Emma agreed. But they made me believe that someone in the world thought I was worth remembering. Even if it was just my teacher. The weight shifted but didn't lift. All those years of documentation, careful conversations, strategic classroom partnerships, I'd thought I was failing because I couldn't intervene in any meaningful way. But Emma was sitting across from me, 30 years old, carrying damage I couldn't have prevented, telling me that being seen had mattered. It didn't feel like enough. It would never feel like enough. Are you okay? I asked, because I couldn't ask the real question, did I do anything that helped, or did I just witness your pain and call it pedagogy? Emma considered this. I'm in therapy. Have been for 3 years. I'm learning that I'm allowed to take up space. That being low maintenance isn't actually a virtue. That I can want things loudly. She paused. I'm not okay yet. But I'm working on it. That's more than survival, I said quietly. Yeah. She smiled, and this time it almost reached her eyes. Yeah, it is. We sat there for a moment, 2 people who'd shared 6 years of careful observation and calculated invisibility, now sitting in a coffee shop processing the aftermath. Can I ask you something? Emma said finally. Anything. Why did you keep the granola bars? Why the extra coat? Why pair me with Rebecca? You knew you couldn't fix it. Why bother with the small things? I thought about all my years of teaching, all the children I couldn't save from bad homes or bad situations or their own developing personalities. I thought about the limits of my profession, the things I was trained to see but not empowered to change. Because small things were all I had, I said. And doing nothing would have meant accepting that you didn't matter. You mattered, Emma. You mattered so much that 18 years later, I still remember what kind of granola bars you liked. Her face did something complicated. Peanut butter chocolate chip. I bought them in bulk, I said. Kept them in the bottom drawer. After you left 6th grade, I couldn't throw them away for 2 years. Emma laughed, but it came out wet. She wiped her eyes quickly. I'm glad I ran into you, she said. I didn't know I needed this conversation until we were having it. I've been having this conversation in my head for 18 years, I admitted. I just never knew how it would end. How does it end? I looked at this woman who'd been my student, who I'd watched disappear in slow motion, who'd survived and was now learning to be more than just a survivor. I thought about all the things I'd documented, reported, worried over. I thought about the limits of intervention and the weight of witness. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know if knowing I was right makes it better or worse. I don't know if those granola bars mattered as much as I needed them to. I don't know if I did enough or if enough was even possible. Emma reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her fingers were cold from the coffee mug. You did what you could, she said. That's more than anyone else did. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't redemption. It was just a fact, and maybe that was all either of us had to offer, the facts of what happened and what we carried because of it. We exchanged numbers before we left the coffee shop. I don't know if she'll use mine. I don't know if I'll use hers. But I have it, and she has mine, and that feels like something. I drove home thinking about patterns I'd seen and couldn't change, about the children who slip through every crack because their damage doesn't photograph well, doesn't leave bruises, doesn't trigger mandated reporting requirements. I thought about Emma at 7, at 10, at 12, getting quieter each year, taking up less space, learning that invisibility was safer than hoping to be seen. I'd retired 2 years after Emma left my classroom. Told myself it was time, that I'd given enough years to education, that I'd earned rest. But the truth, the one I didn't say out loud even to my husband, was that I couldn't keep watching anymore. Couldn't keep documenting concerns that went nowhere, making phone calls that changed nothing, keeping granola bars in my desk like that was pedagogy instead of just bearing witness to neglect I couldn't prove. Emma wasn't the only one. She was just the one I couldn't forget. There was Marcus, who I had for 3 years, whose father picked him up drunk more times than sober but never quite drunk enough for me to call it in. There was Lily, whose mother's boyfriends rotated through every 6 months, each one a little worse than the last, but Lily learned to be charming and funny and never told anyone what happened when the lights went out. There was David, who was clearly being raised by his older sister while their mother worked 3 jobs, and the exhaustion in that 16-year-old's eyes when she came to parent-teacher conferences made me want to scream at a system that demanded productivity over humanity. I saw them all. I documented them all. I did what I was trained to do, which was never quite enough to do what needed to be done. Teaching is about loving children you can't save. They don't tell you that in credential programs. They tell you about learning outcomes and classroom management and differentiated instruction. They don't tell you about the weight of knowing and being unable to act. They don't tell you about the specific way a child's shoulders curve inward when they're learning to disappear. They don't tell you that you'll retire with a collection of names and faces that will follow you into grocery stores 18 years later. My husband asked me once, about 4 years into retirement, why I still kept a pack of peanut butter chocolate chip granola bars in the pantry. We didn't eat them. They just sat there, box after box, until they expired and I'd replace them. I told him I liked having them on hand. He didn't push, but he knew. After 37 years of marriage, he knew the things I carried and why. I thought about Emma's hand on mine, cold and certain. You did what you could. Such a simple sentence. Such an impossible absolution. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I pulled out my old file cabinet, the one I'd brought home when I cleaned out my classroom. It was organized by year, then by student concern level. Emma's file was thick, 6 years of observations, copies of emails to counselors, notes from parent phone calls. December 14th, 2nd grade, Emma arrived without birthday acknowledgement from family. Brought cupcake. She cried. March 3rd, 4th grade, E's brother received awards assembly attendance from both parents. E received academic achievement certificate, no family present. E said they forgot. November 18th, 5th grade, Thanksgiving family tree project. E's entries noticeably sparse compared to peers. When asked about family traditions, she went quiet. Classmate Sarah mentioned E's brother gets all the attention. E didn't deny it. January 30th, 6th grade, parent-teacher conference. Mother attended for Evan, 2nd grade, but not for Emma. When I requested conference for you specifically, Mother said Emma's fine, she doesn't need extra attention like Evan does. Noted response for counselor review. Page after page of a child being erased in slow motion. Page after page of me watching it happen. I'd kept these files because throwing them away felt like erasing these children a second time. But reading them now, knowing Emma had survived, knowing she was in therapy and learning to take up space, knowing she'd walked away from her family, it hit differently. I hadn't saved her. But I'd seen her. And maybe Emma was right. Maybe sometimes that was the difference between surviving and not surviving at all. I thought about the granola bars in my pantry, the ones I couldn't stop buying. I thought about Rebecca Torres, who I'd strategically partnered with Emma, and wondered if Rebecca remembered. I thought about the winter coat I'd accidentally bought in Emma's size, and how she'd worn it for 3 years straight until she outgrew it. Small things. Inadequate things. But things nonetheless. My phone rang that afternoon. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mrs. Patterson? It's Emma. Hi, Emma. I was thinking about our conversation yesterday. About Rebecca Torres. She paused. I looked her up. She lives in Portland now. We're meeting for dinner next week. That's wonderful. I wanted to thank you, Emma said, for pairing us up. She told me once, in 8th grade after we'd gone to different middle schools, that her mom had asked why she always invited me over. Rebecca said it was because she could tell I needed a family, even if it was just borrowed for a few hours. I closed my eyes, feeling something tight in my chest loosen slightly. Rebecca's mom knew? I asked. Rebecca's mom knew. She said she'd talked to you once, in 5th grade. You'd mentioned that I might benefit from playdates in a structured family environment. She said you never said anything directly, but she understood what you were asking. Mrs. Torres. Rosa Torres. Loud, warm, perpetually chaotic, with 4 kids in a house that always smelled like cooking. She'd volunteered in my classroom twice, had always been kind to Emma. I didn't know she'd understood, I said quietly. She did. And she made sure I was always welcome. Rebecca's little sister used to call me her bonus sister. Emma's voice caught. I had a family, Mrs. Patterson. Not my own, but I had one. Because you made a phone call I didn't know about until yesterday. I hadn't made a phone call. I'd had a careful conversation during a classroom volunteer session where I'd mentioned that Emma might benefit from social connections outside of school, that she seemed isolated, that structured playdates with emotionally healthy families might provide good modeling. I'd thought it was another inadequate gesture. Apparently, Rosa Torres had heard what I was really saying. I'm glad, I managed. I'm telling you because I think you need to know that the small things added up, Emma said. The granola bars. The coat. Rebecca. The birthday cupcakes. All the tiny ways you saw me, they added up to something bigger than you knew. After we hung up, I sat with that for a long time. The small things added up. It didn't erase the guilt. It didn't change the fact that I'd watched a child be emotionally neglected for 6 years and couldn't legally intervene. It didn't give me back the certainty I'd had in my 20s, when I thought teaching was about saving children through force of will and pedagogical excellence. But it meant something. To Emma, it had meant something. I started volunteering 3 months after that coffee shop encounter. Not teaching, I was done with classrooms. But there's a nonprofit in my area that provides school supplies, winter coats, and weekend food bags to students whose families can't afford them. They needed someone to coordinate donations, match resources with specific school requests, handle logistics. It's granola bars on a larger scale. It's winter coats without the pretense of accidents. It's doing what I can with what I have, and knowing it's not enough, and doing it anyway. Emma and I meet for coffee every few weeks now. Sometimes we talk about her therapy, her journey toward believing she deserves space and attention and love. Sometimes we talk about my volunteer work. Sometimes we just sit together, two people who shared 6 years of careful observation and strategic inadequacy, processing the aftermath. Last week, she told me she's dating someone. A woman she met at a library conference, who noticed her immediately, who calls when she says she will, who thinks Emma's quietness is thoughtfulness instead of trained invisibility. I'm scared, Emma admitted. I keep waiting for the moment when she realizes I'm too much work. Or not enough of something. You're enough, I said firmly. You were always enough. Your family was broken, not you. She smiled, that almost reaching her eyes smile. My therapist says the same thing. It's starting to feel true sometimes. Sometimes. Not always. Not yet. But sometimes. I think that's what healing looks like, not dramatic transformation, not perfect resolution, but slow accumulation of moments where the truth feels possible. Like granola bars in a desk drawer. Like strategic classroom pairings. Like birthday cupcakes for a child whose family forgot. Small things. Inadequate things. Things that add up over 18 years into a woman who's learning she was worth remembering all along. I still keep granola bars in my pantry. I probably always will. But now when I see them, I don't just think about all the children I couldn't save. I think about Emma, 30 years old, dating someone who sees her, rebuilding a life where she's allowed to exist loudly. I think about the fact that I didn't save her, but I saw her. And sometimes, in a world designed to overlook certain kinds of suffering, being seen is the first step toward learning you were worth saving all along. On my 64th birthday, Emma sent me a package. Inside was a framed photograph, me and her, from 6th grade graduation. I'm standing next to her with my hand on her shoulder, and she's holding her academic achievement certificate. She's not quite smiling, but she's not disappearing either. There's a note tucked into the frame. For the teacher who remembered when no one else did. The small things added up to everything. Thank you for seeing me, Emma. I put it on my desk, next to the photo of my own children, next to my retirement plaque from Lincoln Elementary. Some days I look at it and still feel the weight of inadequacy, all the things I couldn't do, couldn't change, couldn't fix. Some days I look at it and feel the impossibility of teaching, the way we're asked to love children we can't protect, to witness suffering we can't prevent, to offer granola bars when what's needed is complete family reconstruction. But most days now, I look at it and think about Emma. About the fact that she survived. About the fact that she's learning to believe she deserves more than survival. About the fact that she's building a life where being seen isn't a rare gift but an expected baseline. I didn't save her. But I saw her, and I kept seeing her, and maybe Rosa Torres saw her too, and Rebecca Torres's whole family saw her, and all those small moments of being seen accumulated into something Emma could build on when she was finally ready to save herself. Teaching is about loving children you can't save. But sometimes, if you're very lucky, you love them enough that they learn to save themselves. Sometimes that has to be enough. 18 years later, standing in a grocery store, finding out I was right, it doesn't feel like vindication. It feels like grief for the child who needed more than I could give, and gratitude for the woman who survived anyway, and the specific weight of having witnessed something I couldn't change but refused to ignore. I was right. I saw the signs. I documented them. I did what I could within a system that doesn't have protocols for children who are fed and clothed and slowly erased. And Emma, brave, quiet, learning to be loud Emma, took those inadequate small things and built a foundation sturdy enough to walk away from the family that forgot she mattered. I don't know if that's a happy ending. I don't know if there are happy endings for stories like this. But it's an ending where Emma is learning to take up space, and I'm learning that witness has value even when it can't prevent harm, and we're both learning that the small things, granola bars, birthday cupcakes, strategic playdates, seeing and being seen, can add up to something that looks like survival, and sometimes, if you're patient, something that starts to look like healing. I kept the granola bars. I still volunteer. I still carry the names of children I couldn't save. But now I also carry this, the knowledge that Emma survived, and some small part of that survival was built on moments when someone remembered she existed. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's something. And sometimes, something is all we have to offer, and we offer it anyway, and 18 years later we find out it mattered more than we knew. I was right about the signs. I just didn't know, couldn't have known, that being right would feel this heavy, this bittersweet, this much like grief and hope tangled together in a grocery store on a Wednesday afternoon. Emma exists loudly now. Not perfectly. Not without scars. But loudly enough that she can't be forgotten anymore, even by herself. And I'm learning to believe that mattered. That I mattered, in the small inadequate ways I was able to show up. That seeing her, even when I couldn't save her, gave her something to build on when she was finally ready to save herself.